This is the starter motor replacement of a Land Rover Freelander 2006. Make sure that the battery is fully charged and that you have cleaned all connections. If that doesn't work, then it's time to replace the starter motor. The tools you require: I've used a 1/2-inch drive socket set. I require a wrench, a 15-inch extension and a 13mm socket. That's to remove one of the bolts of the starter motor itself. Some wire snips I don't show in action here, but they're actually used here and there to remove the clips which contain wires and some hoses. Now we also need a 30mm cranked ring spanner. That's to remove both the starter motor bolt and the 12mm bolt, sorry, the 30mm bolt to the starter motor itself, and a 15mm ring or combination spanner because one of the nuts on the starter motor itself, or one of the bolts, is 15mm. To remove the hoses, you'll need a Phillips and a flat screwdriver. To gain access, we're going to need to remove the hoses across the engine. That's what we need the screwdrivers for. Left and right, 2 on the left, 1 on the right need to be removed. We're also going to remove the battery. This is not only a safety measure. We need the battery and the battery supporting box to be removed. That's how we get access to starter motor bolt. So remove whichever hose clamps you feel are necessary. I removed, as you can see there, 2 on the left and 1 on the right, and I pulled it back. Remove the battery itself. You'll need to remove the battery clamp. There are 4 bolts to remove the battery box, 1 at the front, 2 at the side, and then 1 actually in the center of the battery container itself, which you'll need to remove. All of them are 13mm. Then remove the 12-volt supply to the starter motor. I used a crank spanner. It's very slow going, it's not easy. And then behind that, it's obviously to the left, and behind that 12-volt supply is the solenoid supply as well. That needs to be unclipped, pulled to the right. That means you've got the hoses away, you've got the battery box out of the way. It's time to gain access. Now you can assess the job. It's time to see the top bolt, or the nut. You ought to see the nut of the starter motor through here. You can see here I've showed a wrench and an extension bar and a socket on the end fitted into the 13mm nut, I beg your pardon, the bolt at the top of the starter motor. Now I actually took a left-handed stance here in order to be able to undo that bolt. Okay, it was rather difficult to get a grip, so I used a left-handed stance. Now for the second starter motor bolt, it's next to where the 12-volt supply was. You'll need the cranked 13mm on the left, standing at the front of the car. And on the right-hand side of that retention bolt is actually 15mm. So get a 15mm ring spanner on the right, the cranked 13 on the left, and you ought to be able to remove that. There's the 2 starter motor bolts. It's difficult to get the starter motor out. You can do so. You don't need to remove the hoses. I did need to swing round a Jubilee clamp, and you need to certainly put the motor in head first, put it downwards first with the rear of the motor pointing out. It took me 10 or 15 minutes to manipulate it and maneuver it into space, but it can be done without any hoses being removed. Please be persistent, be careful, and try and manipulate it. You will get it into place. You can use your hands and your fingers to get the starter motor bolts back into place. Obviously now is replacement, a reverse of removal, put back on the clamp, and it was a total of 90 minutes for me as an amateur before I was able to restart.